Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you guys how to make this awesome inside out cake full of emotion. Also, don't forget to click here and subscribe. To get started, I have some vanilla cake batter, which I'm going to fold some colorful sprinkles inside of to turn it into a funfetti batter. Then I'm going to divide my funfetti batter into two separate round 10-inch cake pans, and I'm going to bake this at 350 degrees for about 30 minutes or until a toothpick inserted in the center of each cake comes out clean. For my second cake layer, I have some more vanilla cake batter, and I'm going to color it 4 different colors. I have yellow, red, blue, and green. Then I'm going to divide each of my cake batters into 4 separate 8-inch round cake pans. And I bake these at 350 degrees for about 20 minutes. Now for the final cake layer, I have a strawberry cake batter, which I'm dividing into 2 separate 6-inch round cake pans. And I'm going to bake these off at 350 degrees once again. Once all the cakes are completely cooled, I go ahead and trim off that little dome top off each of the cakes, and I level them so that they have a nice flat surface on top. Now for my colorful cakes, after I've trimmed off the dome top on each one, I'm going to flip it over and trim off that caramelization on the bottom of each cake. And for my 6-inch strawberry cakes, after I trim off the dome top, I'm going to cut each cake in half so that I have 4 separate cake layers. To start assembling the cakes, I start with my 10-inch funfetti cakes, and I'm applying some buttercream onto a cake board to help it stick. I add the cake layer, I drizzle it with simple syrup, fill it with buttercream, add the second cake, and I begin the crumb coat. I let the cake chill, and then I give it a second coat of buttercream and pop it back in the fridge to set. For my second cake tier, I have an 8-inch cake board, and I repeat the process starting with the blue cake layer, drizzle it with simple syrup, add buttercream, and I keep working my way up, doing green, yellow, and finally top it off with red. Then I continue the crumb coat process, refrigerate it, give it a second coat of buttercream, and refrigerate it again. Now to assemble the last cake, I add it onto a 6-inch cake board, and I go ahead and add the first cake. I've already drizzled them with simple syrup. I go ahead and fill them with buttercream, and I keep layering until I reach the top, and repeat the same process, giving it a crumb coat, refrigerating it, giving it a second coat of buttercream, and refrigerating it once again. Once the cakes are set, I go ahead and start covering the first cake layer, which is the funfetti cake, in some light blue fondant. I just roll the fondant over the cake, I smooth it out with my fondant smoother, and I trim off the excess fondant using a pizza cutter. Now this next step I usually do before I apply the fondant, but I totally forgot. I'm going to go ahead and add dowels onto the first 2 tiers. And these are just to help support all the weight of the cakes on top of them. Now for my next cake, which is the 8-inch colorful cakes, I am going to grab some red fondant and cover just half of the cake. It's okay if it's not perfect. I'm going to come in with my X-Acto knife and create a perfectly straight line through the center. Then I'm going to come with some light green fondant and cover the other half of the cake. And for the final cake layer, I am going to cover it in some purple fondant. Now that all the cakes are covered, it's time to add details. Now I'm covering one half of the blue cake in this kind of indigo color for sadness, because she has kind of like a gray tone to her. And then I'm adding a darker color, a darker shade for her hair, and I'm going to add that little side swoop that she has that covers half of her face. Then I'm going to add another piece of that darker fondant for the opposite side of her hair. Now with one of my modeling tools, I'm just creating some indented strips on the hair so it can look like hair strands. I'm going to do this for all of the characters that have hair. With more of that dark bluish purplish fondant, I made her eyebrow, and I made a rainbow shape for the frown on her face. To make her eyes, I have some white fondant, and I'm using a small cookie cutter to cut out 2 perfectly round circle shapes for her eyes. Her iris is going to be that dark purple blue color. Then I'm going to add her black pupils, and I'm going to add a white dot in the center. For her glasses, I'm using some more of that dark fondant. I'm using a bigger cookie cutter and then a smaller cookie cutter in the center to cut out the holes, and then I'm going to place these right over her eyes. Then I'm going to cut out a small strip and place that in between the 2 circles. Now for the opposite side of sadness, I'm going to make joy. Remember I had that blue fondant. I actually removed it because I realized that I needed to add yellow first for Joy's skin color. So I'm recovering that in some yellow fondant. To make Joy's eyes, I have some white fondant and I'm going to cut out 2 large ovals, and then I'm going to add a blue iris in the center of that, and then a black pupil, and I'm also going to add a white dot in the center of the pupils to make her eyes look like if they're sparkling. I outline her eyes with some dark blue fondant and I create her nose using a small ball of yellow fondant. To create Joy's big ol' smile, I grab some black fondant and I create a half moon shape. And then I place that on her face. I create a strip for her teeth, and then I outline the mouth with some pink for her lip color. I finish off her face details by adding 2 small balls by her cheeks. To finish Joy off, I grab some more of that blue fondant and I created some triangular blue strips of hair, and I'm just placing these on her head. Now moving on to the second cake layer, which is the green and red, which is for disgust and anger. We're going to start off with disgust, and I have some dark green fondant and I'm just making a swoop shape for her hair. She has that little side swoop. And I'm going to add the other part on the opposite side of her face. And I grab some more of that light green fondant and I create a small circle in the center of her face for her nose. Now to make her eyebrows, I have some more of that dark green fondant and I'm just freeforming the eyebrows. You gotta get them right because her eyebrows are on fleek. I'm also going to create the little winky eye and her eyelashes and place these onto her face. To create her eyeball, she has a pretty oval shaped eye, and I'm just going to cut it out of white fondant. I'm going to make her dark green iris. I'm going to add the black pupil in the center of that and the white sparkle on the center of the eye. And my camera cut off as I was making her lips, so sorry that part did not come out in the video. On the opposite side of disgust is anger, so to make his facial features, I grab a tube of fondant and I create that M-shaped arch for the wrinkle on his forehead. To make his eyes, I have some white fondant and I'm cutting out 2 almond shapes. Then I am adding a black dot in the center, and then on top of that it's going to be the red iris. And then we're going to add a black pupil in the center, and then we're going to grab my modeling tool and just kind of blend those together to give it more of a real pupil look. And then we're going to add the white dot in the center. And I place the eyes right under that M-shaped wrinkle. To make his mouth, I have some black fondant and I'm creating that same M-shaped arch on the top and then a straight line on the bottom. I'm adding 2 strips of white fondant, one at the top and one at the bottom for his teeth, and then with my modeling tool, I'm going to make the indentation of the teeth. Now using a thin strip of black fondant, I'm going to outline the bottom perimeter of his eye. Now I'm going to make some flames that are going to go on top of Anger's head, and they're actually going to be on Fear's cake layer. So I'm just rolling out some red and yellow fondant and I am going to create some flame patterns. Then I'm going to set these aside. To finish off the purple cake, which is Fear, I'm going to cut out his eyes using a round cookie cutter out of white fondant, and I'm going to place these on his face. Then I'm going to make his nose using a lollipop stick and some purple fondant, covering the lollipop stick and shaping it to the shape of his nose, and I'm going to insert that right under his eyes. Then I'm going to finish off his eyes by adding a purple iris and then a black pupil and the white sparkle. I'm going to outline his eyes using a purple tube of fondant. For his eyebrows, I used black fondant and I just cut out 2 thick strips and placed them on top of his eyes. Now for his mouth, I'm using some more black fondant and I created a frown shape, and I'm using some white fondant and cutting out a thick strip, and I'm going to make the indentation of the teeth, and then I'm going to outline the whole mouth using more purple fondant. And finally, I just rolled a tube of purple fondant and I swirled it on the top of his head to be the little antenna. Now I'm going to stack the cakes on top of one another. I add a long dowel through the center of the first tier, and then this is going to go through the second cake, and then it's also going to go through the very top cake, but it's not going to go through all the way, it's just going to go in midway, and this is going to be excellent support for keeping all 3 cakes together. And this wonderful inside out cake full of emotions is complete. At the very bottom we have sadness and joy. On top of that we have disgust and anger. And at the very top we have fear. And our cake is as colorful on the inside as it is on the outside. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and stay tuned next week for another episode. Bye-bye.